In this video, I share my personal story of being in New York City on 9/11, and I also interview Tonya Harris and Sarah Montana about their story. They're both speakers who I've worked with, and they can share with us today the importance and the power of sharing your story, because when you do, you can change and even save a life. Hey everybody, Tricia Brouk here, executive producer of Speakers Who Dare, curator of the Speaker Salon, and founder of the Big Talk Academy. I am so excited to be here live with you today on this very, very important day, September 11th in New York City. I wanted to come on live today because I was in New York City 18 years ago when the planes hit the Twin Towers. I lived below 14th Street. And I experienced the same tragedy as everyone else in my city. And I wanted to just come on and honor the people who lost their lives, the families who were affected by this, the country that was affected by this, and the servicemen and women that were affected by what happened on this day 18 years ago. It seems just like yesterday. I can't believe it was actually 18 years ago. Like I said, lived below 14th Street, which meant that I had to provide identification to get home. They closed the city down from 14th Street below. I also was actually performing in a show, and I kept thinking to myself, why are we doing a show? This tragedy just happened, and our city needs to come together. And it was really, really hard to go to the theater because it was actually also right on 12th Avenue where the highway was that led straight down to the World Trade Center. And we would stand outside before going on and watch the fire trucks drive by and watch the rescue mission underway. You know, metallic taste in the mouth and just like not knowing where we were, what had happened. And I remember thinking, I don't want to do a show. But we did. The show went on. We went in and we performed in the theater, and we had people come. We had people come to the show and sit there and receive what we had to give them. And after that first performance, and I think it was September 12th, they came up to us afterwards and they said, "Thank you for reminding us what beauty is and the power of art and theater." And that's why I'm coming live today to talk with you all, because the power of story and the importance of sharing a story is your responsibility, because you can help people, you can save people. When you decide to talk about something in your personal life and in your journey that is challenging, painful, difficult, when you get to the other side and are able to talk about it, you can save people's lives. You can make a difference. You can have the kind of ripple effect that makes the world a better place. And you all know, anybody who knows me, I want to make the world a better place by putting people on big stages and by putting people on big screens. And I have the absolute privilege of having two of my favorite people and speakers with me today. And the reason that Tonya Harris and Sarah Montana are here with me today is because they also have the courage to share their stories. And I'm going to just give you a little background on these incredible women. Sarah Montana is a screenwriter, writer, and public speaker. Her first movie, Love to the Rescue, debuted on the Hallmark Channel in March of 2019, and she is currently contracted to write 6 more movies. Her play, The Girl, the Ghost, and the Minotaur, was winner of the Life Jacket Theater Company's Proof of Concept reading series. She's spoken at TEDx Lincoln Square and at the AHA Women's Speaker Series in St. Louis. And she spoke on healing, forgiveness, and overcoming adversity. Her talk, Why Forgiveness is Worth It, is featured on TED.com. Yes, her TEDx Lincoln Square talk, which once lived on YouTube, has now been elevated, promoted to TED.com. She is a Gateless Writing Method certified teacher and teaches students of all ages How to Fall in Love with the Creative Process. She is currently working on her first memoir, Stay in Touch. Sarah, I'm excited about the memoir. I had no idea.
Yeah, thank you so much. I mean, it's, one of those things you don't tout, when you're in process as much, but I think it's important to talk about because I teach creative process and, how to tell a story and that. So I think it's good to talk about. It's been the most transformative. Everybody should write a memoir, whether they want to publish it or not, I think. The way it changes your life to just have to treat your whole story as myth and get into the archetypal and really get into the weeds with craft. I mean, like everything you do with your speakers on stage, it's been a crazy soul transforming journey.
Amazing, amazing. Before we go on with Sarah, I want to introduce our other guest, Tonya Harris. Tonya Harris is an award-winning environmental toxin expert, the founder of Slightly Greener, offering busy moms simple solutions to reduce toxins without turning their lifestyle upside down. She's also the host of the upcoming Happy Child Project podcast, which I have the privilege of being a featured guest. And as a childhood leukemia survivor and mother of 3, including one with multiple learning disabilities, Tonya helps parents learn how toxins in the home can affect their family's health. In addition to a board certification and master's degree in holistic nutrition, she holds multiple certificates in the environmental health field. Really cool stuff. She's been featured in Parents, Reader's Digest, has appeared on TV shows like Great Day Washington, Good Morning Cincinnati, Dr. Oz, and since this came in this morning, Fox News in Chicago. Recently, Tonya and her daughter were featured in a short documentary, You're Gorgeous, I Love Your Shirt, a look into the crisis of bullying and mental health that I happened to produce and direct. And it's being distributed in LA in September at the Lemley NoHo 7, which is super exciting. It has a major theatrical distribution and is, of course, running the festival circuit. Welcome, Tonya and Sarah. I am so honored and excited to have you here with me today on this very important day.
Yeah, thank you for having us. We're so excited to be here.
Absolutely.
Sarah, I would love for you to share with our audience a little bit about your story. I jumped right in with mine, and I want you to share your story, please.
Sure. On December 19th, 2008, I was a senior in college when my dad and I got the phone call that my mother and brother had been killed in a burglary attempt on our home. The kid who did it, it turned out, was 17 years old. He was a friend. He was a friend's sibling, essentially, a friend's younger brother. We knew him, but didn't know him particularly well. And it was December 19th, it was, about a week before Christmas. Our worlds were just kind of turned upside down in the blink of an afternoon.
When you decided to allow other people to hear your story, when you decided to share your story, this was many years later. And I want to say this because for those speakers who are tuning in right now, when you choose to share a story from a stage in order to support and help other people, you must be on the other side of it.
Yes.
And that is why when you submitted your video to TEDx Lincoln Square and sat in your room looking across this computer screen into the lens without any fancy lighting, lit by your monitor, and I felt inspired. It was so clear to me that you had moved past, through, and beyond this and were ready to share it so you could help other people. Talk a little bit about that, Sarah.
It's, it's funny now. I get a lot of people who say that something traumatic has happened to them and the immediate impulse is, I want to write a book. I want to do a talk. I think this is a movie. And I don't think that impulse is wrong. I think it's about knowing the process. That impulse, I think, comes because we know art, like you said at the beginning of this, is one of our biggest, most powerful healers. It's one of the best forces we have. And I think we have an impulse to get our stories out of our bodies so that we can make sense of them when they're externalized. When we can look at them, then we're actually able to engage with them instead of them having a grip on us from the inside. And the truth is, before I applied to the TEDx, I took the time to write a play about what happened. I got all of my stories out of my body. I went to therapy. I mean, I engaged with the story of what happened to me on every possible level. And it was in the process of writing the play that I realized that I didn't have an ending. I had lived this story up to a certain chapter, but I had dramatized the whole situation so that it was a little more fictionalized in some ways. And I realized with the antagonist, the kid who killed my mother and brother, that I could either fictionally kill him or I could forgive him. And I realized I had not had to make that choice yet. And that art, in a weird way, spawned my whole next spiritual journey of figuring out, well, what is forgiveness? What does it really mean to forgive? I've said that I forgive him, but I guess that I don't really, because here I am still grappling with this question. The art threw me into the best adventure of my life. But by the time I applied to TEDx, I had examined that thing from so many sides, and I was so clear, and I'd already been through that journey, that by the time I got on stage, I was thinking about what the audience needed. I didn't really need anything from it.
Right.
There were amazing benefits that came from sharing my story, but I didn't need that. I needed to share something because I knew other people might be where I was at one point struggling. I think that's a huge difference in terms of when you're ready to share.
Absolutely. It clearly became a gift, not an ask.
Yes. TED rule number 1.
Exactly. And why was it important to share that story?
I've seen, honestly, in some ways, I think that when I was struggling the most, and when this first happened to my family, I kept looking for, there were a lot of self-help books out there. There was a lot of advice. There weren't a lot of stories. And I personally can intellectually take in advice, but I am most transformed by story.
Yeah.
That is how I heal personally. I will get much more out of, like, even something like an episode of Grey's Anatomy, where I get to get into a character's body and work through a situation, even if the circumstances are different. The catharsis is real, and the like physical and emotional awakening is real. So in some ways, I was creating the talk that I needed in 2008, and thinking about it like a very specific past version of me. And in other ways, I had seen how people who had been traumatized, whether it was, family members of mine, not even really family members of mine, just our society. Unfortunately, so many people are going through this now. I'm not the only person who is a victim of gun violence. Every day on the TV, someone else is struggling. And you realize that while I may have thought that I was doing all of this work just for myself in order to get to a safe place, there are people every day who are starting at ground zero again. So it felt important to share.
And when you knew it was important to share and you'd gotten to the other side, why did you decide to share it on the TEDx platform?
When I was in college, and even right after Mom and Jim died, I used to watch TED videos for inspiration. TED wasn't super well yet, but I would go on and just watch TED Talks, and I would watch people talk about anything and everything, but mostly I was looking for hope and inspiration and story. And so there was something personal about the association of the brand there. Yeah. There's something about doing it with you in New York City on the stage that feels, to do that with you here with somebody with your expertise and command of storytelling and craft was a big deal. I could have made a YouTube video, I guess, and I could have thrown it out there, but I don't think it would have had the same impact. And doing something like TED or TEDx is it's a double whammy, right? Like, on the one hand, it's going to live in a digital space where it can have a lot of impact. But on the other hand, it has to be done live in a room full of people where you're having that exchange. And it's how those two things come together that I think is really important.
Amazing. I really appreciate you sharing all of this with our listeners and our audience. I think they're going to really feel inspired and impacted to tell their story. Tonya, I'd love to hear your story, even though I know it. I would love to hear it again so that our listeners can become familiar with your incredible story as well.
Sure. Should I start with just what happened with Lindsay?
Why don't we start with how we got from you speaking about your journey and then through Lindsay to the documentary?
Yeah, that it's hard to believe it hasn't even been that long. I don't think since we started about the talk. I think I came to you knowing I wanted to talk, but didn't think I could and didn't even know I had to talk. I knew that there was something in there, but I sure did not know what it was. And then started going through I think it was a night that I was coming to New York for the speaker salon, and my daughter had written a poem about her learning disabilities. And the talk I was coming to you with was not anything having really to do with her. And when she sent that to me, all of a sudden I was like, oh my God. I mean, like I was crying over her poem because it was beautiful. And I'm like, oh, she has been listening to me. Haha. I would have thought that this teenage girl was listening to everything I was saying. She's got learning disabilities and has had a rough time in school with some kids and also with some teachers. So she's had it pretty rough since third grade. So anyway, we started working on this talk, and it was the first time I had shared her story on stage. And the way you helped me craft it, I think, like turned such a switch in my head. And I realized too, even before we started the documentary, you know, we compared my childhood cancer and getting all this love and attention to Lindsay having a diagnosis also in her elementary school years, but she's getting bullied and stigmatized. But really, what is so different about what we went through? It's a diagnosis. It's something that happens in the body, and that things like that deserve the same care and respect as cancer. And I loved that so much, and I thought that needed to get out there. And then, you know, some other things happened in school, and we moved, and she had a really rough time. And I was sharing that with you as we were working on our talk. And I think then, you know, you approached it as maybe we can film this. And like, I think I heard you say the other day, you know, I went home and talked to my family and we agreed to do it. And I was surprised Lindsay agreed to do it. But the more I've talked with you too, Tricia, is just the way you've always presented destigmatizing things through story, and everything that Sarah was saying too. It's like, I didn't realize how important story was. And like, you know, Sarah, I agree with everything you said. I was just like hanging on every word there because it's so true, and nothing I had really realized. And I had so many aha moments just now with you, but it's all about our brains actually they're designed really to respond to story. And so many people do. And you're right. Story is how we get through this. And Tricia, with destigmatizing through entertainment, and also being able to speak to people on that stage, like you said, and just having that eye contact, and just, I think the audience feels it more too. So I don't even know if I answered that question all correctly, but that's kind of the story and how we got to do the documentary. And I'm still speaking on it today. And, you know, it's just so interesting, the feedback I get to it. I just didn't realize how powerful it really was.
That's something that's really important to understand when you go into speaking, when you're going to tell your story, is that you're going to get instantaneous feedback. People are going to thank you. People are going to thank you. They're going to share your story so that other people can hear it. And that response is why we do this. It's about helping people. And when you know you have helped someone, it gives you the courage and the stamina to keep going.
Yeah, I agree with that too. And I think also, you know, the point that you made earlier too is that when you are going through it, it's not the best time, but when you come out of it is a better time. And I also think that even with my childhood cancer stuff, I've never talked about that before. And I actually put it in one of my talks. It takes away the power over you a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
And I think Lindsay has seen that too. So I think that's a really powerful thing too, is it doesn't have to be, I mean, whatever platform you're comfortable with, but I think the more we all share what we're going through, other people feel like they're not alone. And then there's that story too, that helps them get through what they're going through so they can help others too.
So incredible. And you touched on it a little bit, but when you shared your childhood cancer survivor story, why did you decide to share it?
Oh, I don't even know. I kind of felt like it was time. You know, I always told Lindsay that if you're going, I believe from my childhood cancer, that I believe that if you're going through something that, I don't even know what the word is, bad, something that, you know, it was, yeah, whatever, bad, but something like that. But at the same time, I'd always said I'd never change it. So I believe that we're given struggles, maybe that's the word, struggles like that, we can really learn from them and turn them into something else that can help other people. So I thought, if I'm telling her that, but yet I'm not willing to talk about mine, that was strange. And also, I did feel like the couple people I started sharing it with, that's when I started to notice it did take the power away. And all of a sudden I could see it as through a different lens, and it helped me heal too, in a way I never thought it could.
I love that. And I also know, having worked with you, Tonya, that when we were identifying the idea and really digging in and opening up, that you realized someone had said something to you unintentionally, and that stayed with you until pretty much this year.
True. Yeah, I didn't even think about that part. Yes. Yeah. And then we wrote a talk on it. And yeah, but I mean, that helped heal too.
Right. And identifying those moments, those massive moments in your life, which might feel like traumatic, which are traumatic events, making it to the other side, working hard to get to the other side, and allowing that to inspire, allowing that to be spoken about through you, through your eyes and expertise and point of view, is how we inspire other people, how we give other people hope, how we show the world that we're all human beings and we all go through really hard things, and we can all still live joyous, incredible, powerful lives.
Right. And just the feedback I got too from people who are going through something similar, not even the same thing being said or even the same circumstance, but we're all going through something that we can all find something in common with, that I know it helped people just with that post, which also helped me. So yeah, it's.
And was it scary to share this story from a stage for the first time, Tonya?
Yes. Yeah. It doesn't mean we're not going to be scared when we do it, but I also think that means more that we should do it once we're through it. That you just don't know who that one person is you're going to help, or hopefully you can help many people. But if it just helps one person and changes a life or changes anything, I think it's so worth it.
And Sarah, what about for you? Was it scary the first time?
I was definitely a little bit anxious and jacked up, especially that morning. And I know I've told you this story before, but I was really nervous, and I got in the Uber to go to the theater, and I started mumbling to myself. And then I said to my Uber driver, "Hi, I'm not going to murder you. I'm just rehearsing my talk, if you don't mind, in the back seat." And he was like, "Yeah, no, that's fine. That's fine." And I was going through it. I went through it in order, and not with much emotion. And I started hearing sniffling, and I was like, "Oh, it's allergy season. I feel you." And then I kept going, and I realized he was crying. And then he was like sobbing to a point where I was like, "Oh no, maybe we should pull over." And he said to me, "I have been carrying this hatred toward my uncle for 25 years because he bankrupted my father and my siblings and I, and took away our entire inheritance. And that's why I'm here now." And he said, "I didn't realize how much I was holding myself back." He was like, "You have to go. You have to get out of the cab. You have to get out of my cab. I have to go home. This was the beginning of my shift and it's over. I got to go." And I was like, "Okay, bye." And I got out of the cab and was like, well, that's all you wanted to do, was you wanted to help one person. So the rest of this is just like gravy at that point. Let's go have fun.
I love that story so much. And that's to the point, one person. And this Uber driver probably shared this story with another person and another person. And that's the power of storytelling. That's the power of having the courage to put together a big talk and to get on a big stage and to share your message. It's so incredible. I would love to hear from both of you. Tonya, what kind of advice would you give someone who is considering sharing their very personal, important story in a big talk format?
Wow. I do think it's probably one of the best ways to heal, is probably the first thing I would say, because I'm surprised how much I healed and how much my daughter seems to have healed since we've shared ours. And like you said, it's not that it's not going to be scary, but I think if you're through it enough, you'll be surprised at the feedback you get, which will also help you in turn also. Because I feel like as much as I'm trying to support other people with my message and my story, that I'm getting supported back just as much through the comments and questions and just what I've been told. So I think that's probably the biggest thing, is just, it could be scary, but do it anyway if you're ready.
Amazing. And Sarah?
The thing that you're most afraid of will probably come true, and yet it will not matter. The power of sharing your story will be so much bigger that you won't care anymore. I was so terrified that I would upset my family, that I would get like all these troll comments on Twitter and on YouTube, and both of those things happened. And each time it happened, I realized, I was like, it's not that it didn't penetrate. It's not that I didn't care. It just didn't matter in the grand scheme of things. In the grand scheme of things, I realized, oh, it shifts everything, because you start getting all of these messages from so many other people talking about how you've transformed their life. You get emails from, a 16-year-old girl in Germany who tells you that she's now liberated from a toxic parent. It's things like that make you go, oh, well, if you're upset over there in your corner, I can't even think about that right now, because look at all of this that just happened. So it's not, we tell people to push through the fear all the time, that the fear is an illusion. Fear's not an illusion. It's just so much smaller than the truth.
That's incredible. I love that point of view. I also, you touched a little bit on, it's important to share the story and how that can affect people. But I do want to say, as somebody who thinks of this and knows that this is an art form, crafting talks, you can't just tell your story. You can't just get up on the stage and blah, 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 blah. Because that could hurt you, that could hurt who you're talking to. So you really need to understand the craft of how to set this up and share in a way that inspires us and definitely makes us not need to take care of you, right?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
So talk a little bit about the art form of what this storytelling talk form is.
I think it has to me, sometimes people get frozen when they're first trying to tell their story, because they think they have to save that moment up and blurt it all out in one moment where they're really sure what it's going to be. To me, writing a talk is a really long process. You should take time to get every single little thing you could possibly think of out onto paper. That is never a waste of time. That's never going to be a bad exercise. All it means is you'll have a bigger treasure trove of things to pull from. And the act of crafting the actual talk is getting your feelings out of the way and going, what specifically do I need to put in this suitcase to serve my audience? What and only what does my audience need in this moment? Because your stories will always be your stories. You can put that this other anecdote you wrote down in a book. It can go in a movie. It can go in anything else you want. But for the talk itself, what does the audience need, and how can you say it as clearly as possible? And when you're using story, when is story a vehicle that arcs to some kind of meaning? Like, you're constantly sharing things, not to unload yourself, but to say, like, how does each thing I share arc to the next point of this journey to get them at a very specific destination?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And you are clearly a master craftswoman at the writing process with the gateless writing certificate. It's an incredible, I'm familiar with Suzanne and Terry, of course, amazing women. Tonya, in terms of your telling of the story and the conscious crafting of it, why is that important for you?
I honestly, before I started speaking, didn't know there was a conscious crafting. I mean, I came into this so not knowing anything, or, like I said, knowing how to talk. But the way you've helped me craft it, it's now I know I can look at something, and I didn't realize how important it was to take people along with you. It's a whole different style of writing. I think the first time I stepped up on the Speaker Salon stage, I got up there and I had written a narrative, and I was boring myself reading. I was like, oh my God, let that timer go off. All out of this misery. So I just was like, oh my gosh. So then when I started working with you, we made it much better. But I had no idea that even just slight changes of words can help put people there with you. And when they're there with you, they are so invested. Yeah. And then when they get invested, they're rooting for you. And I think that's what really grabs them and brings them into the story. And that's where they can get the help that they need too. And I've had so many people come up to me after different talks, and they all tell me something different that they got from it, which I thought was interesting. Because last time somebody came up and I'm like, that did not even cross my mind. But yeah, that I could see why people would get that out of it. So it's so neat to hear too, once people are in your story, how they see themselves, whether they're going through something similar or something completely different. Everybody can see a piece of themselves in the story when you craft it in a certain way and bring them along with you for the ride.
That's such great advice. I think that's so wonderful. And just for our listeners out there, I know you all have an important story to share and an incredible message to share in order to help other people. When you decide to do that, be sure to understand the art of the big talk and the art of crafting your talk so that you can help as many people as possible, for sure. Well, you all know that I am the founder of the Big Talk Academy, a brand new 12-week certification program for speakers. Speakers who work with me in New York City at the Speaker Salon, they get to work with me in person. And in order to serve and help as many people as possible create their messages and get onto big stages, I've decided to create the Big Talk Academy, which is virtual. You can do it from any city, any country in the world. And I'm super excited that it is available right now. Early bird special, thebigtalkacademy.com. Take a look. If you're interested in sharing your very important story, I would love to help shepherd you to the stage. It's online, it's lessons, but you also get direct access to me through group Zoom calls. So it's pretty cool. Tonya and Sarah, I would love for you to just share one last departing message with our guests today. It's been such a pleasure to have you, and I appreciate you both so much, and your stories are incredible. You definitely want to look up Sarah Montana on TED.com. Her forgiveness talk is incredible. Tonya Harris, Speaker Who Dares. You can see her talk on the Speaker Who Dares channel on YouTube. Tonya and Sarah, a few final words for our listeners.
You were born to tell stories. That is what makes you human and not any other kind of organism on the planet. I think it is the thing that differentiates us from every other species and form of life. It's how we relate to our existence. And so there's no such thing as a waste of telling your story or sharing your story or writing your story. Like, don't let anything stand in the way. It's your birthright, literally.
Love that. Thank you, Sarah.
Yeah, I love that too. Oh my gosh, that's amazing. I agree with all that. And yeah, I agree that if you think you have a story and you're ready to tell it, that it probably is time. And I know we talked about this, and I think I mentioned at the beginning, you can normalize things and destigmatize things through entertainment and through sharing your stories, because that is how we all relate. And sometimes it's easy to listen to a talk or see something in a movie or a documentary or anything that you can kind of have that hard conversation without having that conversation, if that makes sense. But I think overall, like what Sarah said, that we were all meant to tell stories, and it's how we relate. And I think it's just such a big part of how we heal too, whether we listen to someone else or tell ours. But yeah, I think my parting words are pretty similar. You are meant to tell a story.
You are all meant to tell a story, and I appreciate you joining us here today. Go tell your story and make the world a better place. Thank you, everybody, for joining.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, thanks, Tricia.
I hope that you will start sharing your powerful story today, and be sure to subscribe and click on that notification bell so that you get access to my newest and latest videos. And I really appreciate that you are here and will always respond to the comments. Big love.